Welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore, and I'm here with Rachel Wilson today. Now, we've spoken on a couple of occasions before on TNT, and I've had the most. I'm like a kid in it. I was saying just before I press record. I'm like a kid in a candy shop. This is just subject matter that I am so into, and I didn't expect to be interested in feminism. I suppose I understand that there's a whole cultural trend at the moment, like almost a destruction of what it means to be feminism, maybe even a deconstruction, and I don't understand it fully, but I kind of understand why it's happening and some of the reasons why it's happening. And that has brought a lot of us into, debating about the LGBTQ plus whatever community. But this is really I think we got to hyper focus on who got us to these places, their motivation, how the ideology of now is being created. And that's what I really like to do. And just before, about 6 months before I first spoke to you, I had kind of become embroiled in a case, so probably 6 months to a year, where I was investigating Gloria Steinem, and she was a great part of that case. And then I realized what feminism was, and why it stunk so much if you see the roots of it. So please, Rachel, can you tell the people at home who you are, what you consider yourself as doing, and what your area of focus is?
Sure. Well, I'm Rachel Wilson. I am just a normal lady from the rural Midwest. I have 5 children. I homeschool them. And it's a kind of a convoluted story of how I got into being, I guess now I'm considered one of the kind of primary source researchers on feminism and the historicity of it. And it really came about kind of from my own life of being like a gifted student going through school, being expected to go to college and have some kind of really important career, doing something important for the world. This was like the expectation for me growing up. And by the time I got done with K through 12 school in the United States, I realized that school was not for smart people, that school did not teach you a whole lot, despite, the vast amount of time you spend there, and that it was much more about sitting in a chair and warming a seat so that the federal government can count your head and then disperse funds than it was about learning, thinking, teaching yourself how to learn, or anything like that. So by the time I got done with high school and was expected to go to college, I couldn't really bear the idea of university. After all that, I was kind of like, ugh. Didn't see the point in it, and everyone around me thought I was insane. My parents thought I was crazy. My teachers thought I was crazy. And I kind of made a bargain and said, I'll just take a year or two off. I'll just join the workforce and see if I still want to go to college in a year or two. And they all kind of begrudgingly said, well, I guess we can't make you. And what I discovered was I didn't think I wanted to go to school. Not only that, but I had my first baby when I was 20. Which I thought was a fantastic thing. I thought, this is great. I'm having a baby. It's what I'm supposed to do. I want to be a mom. I loved being a mom right away. And everyone expected me to go straight back to work and drop the baby off in daycare. And I remember just being heartbroken about that. I dreaded every minute of it. And I didn't get much time with my baby before I was supposed to drop her off at a daycare all day. And I thought, why am I going to work 40 hours a week? I'll see her for a few minutes in the morning and maybe a couple hours at night. And the rest of my existence is dedicated to working so that I can pay half of what I make so that some other lady can do what I want to do, which is raise my child. And when I would voice these things to the people around me, I was treated like I was crazy, like I was the weird one. Even the Christian conservative women around me were like, this is how we do it now, Rachel. You don't want to go back to the evil days of oppression.
It's one or the other, Rachel. Rachel, if you don't hand over your baby, we're going to have to whip you. You understand that, don't you?
Yeah. You don't want to be a slave to some man. Don't you want to go work for a corporation? Doesn't that sound great? None of it really made sense to me. And even at that age, I started thinking, how did this become the system? How did this become the standard? Because I'm very close with my grandmother, who's still alive. She's going to be 99 in April.
Woo!
Yeah, and
Oh, good on her.
she mostly raised me because I had a very Marxist feminist mother who did believe in that whole oppression narrative and pushed it really hard. And so she would drop me off at grandma's all the time so she could go off doing whatever it was that she was doing. And so I spent a lot of time with someone who was born in, and my other grandma as well, I spent a lot of time with. She was born in 1918. My grandma, who's still here, was born in 1926. So growing up with them, I had a very different worldview that I absorbed from spending a lot of time with them. And I thought, my grandmothers did not do things this way. They didn't, believe that their husbands were slave drivers and that they needed to work for a corporation in order to ensure that they wouldn't be abused. Like, they didn't drop their kids off at daycare all day. Why is it that I have to do this? It doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right to me. But everyone told me this is how it is. This is better. This is the best way to do things. And so I started kind of looking into how did this happen? How did we have such a massive shift from when my grandmother was my age to now? Like, how it seems like a big change. And I had no idea when I started researching this stuff just what I was getting myself into, because feminism might not seem like a big deal to those of us born after 1965, but it is, without a doubt, the single greatest revolution in all of human history. There's no other revolution that comes close. Not even, I would say, even the Industrial Revolution. That's probably number 2, a very close second. But this feminism changed everything about the way that we live our lives, the way that we view the world, the way that we interact with each other
and can
in
I
less
say,
than 100 years.
And the ability to be controlled.
Yes.
Because I always try and push this out, is that, every man, if they were to think what the most important person throughout their life is probably going to be their mum, old sister, nan, whatever, there's going to be this woman who was so important to just automatically changed their mind, looked after them, made decisions about everything, and pushed them into doing things and giving them advice to do things and steer them in ways that other men just don't do. Men kind of bully and cajole each other. You look up to your father, you're chasing him, but you're never quite catching up. But your mum and the women around you will give you advice, and they change people. They change how you live your life and the decisions that you make, even if it comes down to voting and stuff as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, how many men out there right now were raised by a single mom? A lot. In the United States, probably about 30-40% of men are raised by a single mom. Parents are divorced. And even if dad's in the picture, you're spending most of your time with your mom. You go to school where 85% of elementary school teachers are female. You go to college universities where it's like extremely dominated by Marxist feminism, the whole institution. We're talking about, the STEM programs are run using feminist standpoint theory now, which we can get into later, but people don't know that they are breathing feminist air, that they are swimming in feminist water, because we've been in it our whole lives. And this is from the time you're a tiny infant. And those of us our age or younger, you have not been exposed to anything in the popular culture that is not extremely feminist. Think of every TV show you watched, every movie you've ever seen, every pop star who is out there right now. It's female superheroes. It's strong, independent women doing it on their own. It's boss babes. It's career girls, Sex in the City, Beyonce.
9 to 5, baby.
Yes, exactly. Even Mary Tyler Moore back in the day was kind of one of the first incarnations of this, or Bewitched. The TV show Bewitched is another great example of this, where it's like, and it's all framed as liberation. Like you were just saying, this helps control people. It does. And the great trick is that they frame it as liberation. Oh, the women are liberated now. And we never ask from what. We just kind of assume like, oh, this evil oppressive patriarchy. And when I started researching the earliest feminists, we're talking not just first wave, but we're talking like even before that. If you go back, my book starts in ancient Sumeria and goes through, the Middle Ages, and then kind of starts with the whole Enlightenment revolutionary ethos and the women that came out of that who were the ones that really popularized it. Mary Wollstonecraft, and then later all the suffragettes in England and America. And when you go back and read their own writings, not some other person's commentary on it, but like you read Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Susan B. Anthony, they're the first ones to tell you that they couldn't get women on board. The women were the ones who weren't interested and didn't want to hear about it. Why? Because they said, look, we can't seem to convince them how oppressed they are. They get most everything they want, right? They enjoy a lot of protection and provision under this evil patriarchy. They don't seem to want to get into revolutionary politics much. They seem to only be interested in raising kids and organizing community events and doing things with their family. And they wrote at length about how horrible it was that we can't get the women on board with this. And when I started reading that, I thought, well, if the women didn't want it, because that's what we're always told, right? You're always told that it was a groundswell, grassroots thing, that women looked around in the 1800s and they went, oh no, we're oppressed. We must march and we must picket and we must bomb post offices until we can vote because we're just so oppressed. And so when I go back and read them, not only saying that women didn't feel oppressed, but these women themselves, like Mary Wollstonecraft, she's participating in the French Revolution. She's gallivanting around Europe in the late 1700s, having children out of wedlock, engaging in threesomes with famous artists. Nobody put her in jail. Nobody beat her, flogged her, put her in the town square. Nothing happened. She, in fact, was able to make money off of this. She had elites who promoted her and told her to write about, women's liberation. So I just thought, man, I'm missing this whole historic oppression piece that I've been told about. Where is it? I can't find it.
I go back a little bit further. When you were saying that, then I was thinking I automatically thought of Lady Godiva. Lady Godiva being the only person who was allowed to keep their lands when William the Conqueror came in and took all the land. There's powerful females throughout history who have gone against the trend. But there's also a lot. Most of my research, I research a lot of family histories, and I go back into the 1800s quite a lot. I'm the early 1900s. And one of the things I realize is that when you're looking at a man, you're looking at all their business stuff and what they're doing. And you're looking at a woman, you're looking at them fundraising for the local schools, the charities, university women's events, things like this. And they're all having a great time. They all seem to be enjoying themselves. There seems to be loads of activity. And I'm sure there's a load of people who didn't like it. And there's like this kind of, I think we come from a generation where something that was pushed out quite a lot is like Jane Austen and Bronte's sort of novels, where these disgruntled women who are obviously ahead of the trend are like, why society like this? I want something different. I'm going to and they're the heroes, the heroines, of the story. And that was kind of put upon our generation more and more. I felt that era was pushed as this like, oh, look how liberating. They were trying to be liberated back then. And I do agree. I think a lot of this is based upon fantasy.
Yes, it definitely is. And that's a really good point about those types of novels and movies. And they would have you believe that every girl in the Victorian era or before was just, turning 17 and being forced to marry an old man she didn't love, and she was pining for the young man she was forbidden to have, or like they did this with a lot of the Disney movies, like Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid. They were not these feminist stories until Disney got a hold of them in the 90s. And now what they've become is, I just want to read books and travel and see the world. I don't want to get married and have children. That's oppressive, right? And it becomes this story of like, oh, women in their heart, what they really want is to just live, laugh, love, and travel the world and be their own person, and everyone's trying to force them into this box. But this is where the whole oppression narrative becomes important, because I've asked very smart people in debates and on podcasts what they think about oppression. I say, give me an example of how you think that women were historically oppressed by men, because this is the narrative, right? It's that the men collectively were trying to keep the women down.
We were having meetings. When I was young, I was brought in, and a load of men sat around in a room and they said, hey, you see those women over there? We've got to oppress them even more than they're oppressed right now. Turn it up to a 9. How can we
keep them down? How can we keep the women down and put a boot on their neck? Yeah, this is the narrative, right? And what it turns out is, like, if you actually go back and look with somewhat of an objective eye, men only got the right to vote in England about 10 years before women did. Men did not historically have this power as a monolith. Men weren't just like roaming free, doing whatever they want, enjoying liberty. They were every bit as oppressed, and I would argue much more oppressed than women throughout history. The vast majority of men, this is, if you look at genetic studies, only like 40% of men who've ever lived have gotten a chance to even reproduce. And that's because men are expendable. They get sent to the front lines to become cannon fodder at a young age. They get sent down into a coal mine. They have to work and do dangerous jobs on a farm or building something, and they have much higher rates of dying in any job they do compared to women. So there's that. I think that's a pretty big piece to the puzzle, but it's like, yeah, it's to the extent that, you know, oh, women couldn't vote. Well, most men couldn't vote either. Men only gained universal suffrage just before women did in almost everywhere that we look. There's a few places where women got the vote maybe a couple decades later than men did, but it's like, historically, so what? That's the blink of an eye. It barely matters. It's like this idea that women didn't enjoy all kinds of privilege. It's like, yes, they were restricted from a few areas, but my book takes a whole chapter to go over and explain all the places in the world that women have historically, going back to ancient Rome, been able to own businesses, own land, have money, inherit things, do pretty much whatever they want. The restrictions were minor compared to the privilege that women had of never having to be, you know, forced to go fight wars that they didn't want to go and die in, or things like this. And then we can talk about the modern era and how much more men are oppressed now. I think that there was like a bit of a natural power balance prior to feminism that feminism completely destroyed and disrupted. So if you look at being a woman, all you have to do in order to have children is be fertile. Somebody out there is gonna fertilize you if you're a woman, right? As a man, it's not so easy. It's not so easy as a man to just go find a woman who's willing to have your babies. You have to be 6 feet tall. You have to make 6 figures. You have to have status. There's all these things that women select for that men have to be or do, or they don't get children. And that's why today each of us has twice as many female ancestors as we do male ancestors. So 80% of women historically have had the chance to reproduce, and only 40% of men have. That's a massive natural advantage that you have being born a woman that men do not enjoy.
There's another statistic in there which I've heard, which says that like on average, the men born today, 50% of them will have one child with 2 different women, and 50% of them won't have any children at all. So there's kind of like, I wonder if those balances, you know, when you were talking then about male oppression and how that's been in the past, you know, I look at the Industrial Revolution and this period. I've been studying the hatting industry in a certain part of the UK in the 1840s and 1850s, as they're fitting these machines that make people go crazy. So Mad as a Hatter came from the fact machines, they were dipping them in acid. That acid made people go crazy. And there was these entire towns where it was just mad people doing mad things all over the place and making very bad decisions while they were doing it, and producing lots of criminal crime, poverty, etc. But the reason why these were installed was because no one was buying straw hats anymore, because the slave trade had finished, and that gave a vacuum of power, and the oppressors looked for the best people to oppress at the time that was best, and it was like, oh, white men. And so the white men got put to work in factories, in mines. They got sent to the ships. They would be sold off to the ships. 13, 14-year-old, you're a boy. Liverpool, you're being sold off. You're going to live life. You're going to come up maybe twice in the entire voyage. You're going to be downstairs shoveling coal and sleeping downstairs with the rats. So I mean, the whole life they lived was awful, oppression after oppression after oppression. And when people say, you know, they had all of this freedom of the past, when you get to the early 1900s, you're like, oh, look, that's the moment where it looks like they may have got some sort of something, but it was conditional. Even the voting was conditional, and all of the other things were conditional as well. So, yeah, sorry to cut you off there. I just wanted to...
No, those are all great points and great examples of what I'm talking about, which is that what we tend to do when we look back at history is to look at it through our current eyes. You know, that's like it's actually a logical fallacy of like currentism, right? It's this idea that I can look back at what was going on in 1777 and understand it as a person who's living in 2025 and actually understand what was happening, but you're not in that ethos, you're not in that world, you don't even understand what it is that you're looking at. And when I talk to women today, you know, I'm like, do you understand that this computer I'm talking on, the electricity that runs everything that we're doing, this internet that we're using right now, that needs satellites that are, you know, orbiting the Earth, the car that women get in to go to their job in the morning, the streets they drive there on, the office buildings that they work in, none of it would exist without men. This modern world that gives women the illusion that they are exactly equal to men and that they are the same as men are is created and built for them by men. And if men that ever goes away...
Yeah, men can still be hairy and stinky and stupid.
Yes, exactly. And it's just like, why do we put up with them? You know, it's like, it's so silly if you stop to think about it for more than 5 minutes, it's all so absurd. It's all so silly that if this modern world were to ever go away, say we had an EMP that took out the power grid for 3 months, there would be not a feminist left on this planet.
No.
All of them would immediately be finding the nearest man that could help them survive. So you can't look back at the past.
You can only create EMPs. As a man, I'm just saying, it would be a good idea if we start producing more EMPs, people.
Well, I mean, people always ask me like what I think is going to happen next, and I just tell them that it's not sustainable. I think at some point in the future, we will look back at this period of feminism and all the stuff that goes with it, the Marxism and all the oppressor-oppressed narrative stuff, and we will laugh and say those people were very silly because the birth rates now around the world are so low that it's actually not sustainable. We're already seeing supply chain interruptions worldwide. Now, COVID did play a part in accelerating all of that. That's true. But we have like dwindling workforce and exploding older populations. So places like Japan and Canada are trying to convince people to euthanize themselves, you know, things like this, because the world we've created post-industrial revolution with, you know, we've practically put an end to poverty except in places where the logistics don't allow. Most of the world can be fed now. We've created this really prosperous world, and the number one correlate worldwide to plummeting birth rates is women's access to higher education. This makes me extremely unpopular to say. I say this, and you know, if I say this on Twitter, the whole place comes for me. Everybody gets very upset. But we do have to think about what it means to tell young women that the thing that they must do and value is work. is having a career, that being a mother and producing and raising the next generation is oppressive, it's restrictive, it's going to stifle you, you'll be unhappy, you'll be bored, you won't be intellectually stimulated, which, give me a break. The vast majority of women I debate, let's just say, I don't think intellectual stimulation is their top priority. I don't think it's the number one thing they need. I'll just be honest about that. Again, makes me very unpopular, but it's to tell all women, hey, spend your first 18 years doing everything you can to get into the best university you can. Okay, they do that. Then they go to university, they spend 4 to 8 years earning a degree in some nonsense. You know, like I think 80% of psychology degrees are now held by women. Do we need more psychologists? Do we need more interior designers? Do we need, more?
Yes, we do need more
weavers?
interior designers.
So they do that, because women want to be good. We want the good girl points. We want to do what we're told is, we want to be achievers. We want to be good girls. So we go through college. Say you graduate when you're 22 even. Well, now you got to start your career. You didn't spend the first 22 years of your life to not start your career, so they feel they must start the career first, and I'll think about family later. So by the time they hit about 30 is when they start getting serious about looking for a man. It takes them maybe 3, 4, or 5 years to find the right man, because they're what they want is pretty high. Their standards are very high. He has to make more than me, even though I've got this good paying, job in this college career. So by the time they get around to having their first baby, they're 35 years old. On average now in the United States, the age a woman is when she has her first child is 31, I believe. It's getting older and older. So the CDC has actually issued kind of like a warning saying that we're actually seeing a rise in maternal death rates for the first time since antibiotics, due to the advanced average maternal age. Women are having babies older and older and older now. And it's resulting in more birth defects, more maternal deaths, more premature births, all kinds of things that we probably don't want, on top of a very low birth rate. In South Korea, the birth rate is 0.7.
Oh, Lord. Wow. It's not going to be South Korea soon, is it? Yeah. It's going to be North Korea soon.
I mean, the future belongs to those who will be there for it. If you're not going to create people to go into the future, there's no future. So I always say, it's really nice for women to have careers or whatever, but to tell them to do all of this at the expense of motherhood is, let's just think. Who would want such a thing? Who would want to drastically reduce the population? Who has an interest in making sure that we don't reproduce?
I don't know. I'm going to go Malthusians!
Yes, you got it. So if you go back and you look at who funded suffrage, because we just talked about how women didn't want it. There was much larger membership in anti-suffrage groups than there were pro-suffrage groups. And I thought, that's bizarre. I was told that this was a grassroots activism thing. But no, there was and there were more men, I think, at certain points involved in the suffrage movement than there were women. So I thought, well, if this is the case, how did it get passed? Who funded this? That's how things get passed, right? Is through funding. And it was wealthy industrialists who had Malthusian beliefs, who thought that the answer to life's problems is less people.
Bloody Fabians. It's the bloody Fabians again.
It's always the bloody Fabians and the Milner Circle and these people who, like the Rockefeller family, who started the Bureau for Social Hygiene, which was basically just a eugenics program. These people, same thing with Planned Parenthood. There's a whole chapter on that in my book too, which actually gave me nightmares to write when I was researching it. I had bad dreams. It was not good stuff. It's very dark stuff. These people hate humanity. They want, and this is the essence. Like, if you want to get really philosophical and metaphysical about it, feminism is basically transhumanism. It's this attempt to overcome our biology, to escape who we are as human beings, to try to cheat death, to try to remake ourselves in our own image rather than in the image of God, in my opinion. So this is what we're seeing it now. We can see what this is. I mean, look at abortion rates around the world still. And we were promised by Planned Parenthood in the 1930s and 40s that if we made abortion safe, legal, and rare, everyone's heard that, that there would be less need for it. And then, of course, when the birth control pill came along, same people funding the birth control pill. If you ever look into what they had to do to test it, it's god awful. You know, they killed people, they tested them unwittingly. It was horrible. But we got the birth control pill, and they said, look, the birth control pill will make abortion a thing of the past. If women have access to contraception, no one will need abortions. Now, we still have like 1 million abortions a year in the United States. Russia still has sky-high abortion rates. Around the world, it's like in the tens of millions. And on top of that, the women are no longer having babies.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, you look at the family court situation and the fact that most children are being raised by daycare workers, not by their mothers, that 40% of children in America grow up without their biological father in their home. You look at what happens to men in family courts. You look at the outcomes for children who are a product of divorce, who grow up without their dads. They're at much higher risk for every possible bad outcome. Being committed to a mental institution, being put on a psychiatric drug, having learning problems, ending up in a rehab facility with addiction problems, being arrested, committing felonies, like every bad thing you could expect. All these children are far, far higher risk for this sort of thing. Things are not, in my estimation, better than they were for my grandmothers. But this is what I'm told. I'm always told, this is pushed on me, and I'm told it was for my benefit as a woman, and that my 4 daughters need feminism. And I'm looking at the outcomes, I'm looking at the consequences, and I failed to see how. I failed to see how this was a movement of liberation that was supposed to make life better for myself and for my daughters. There's a piece on my Substack that I would love for everybody to check out. It's probably one of the most important things I've written, and it's called 45 Years of Data Disproving the Myth That Fathers Are the Aggressors. Because you're always told this, and this was a big point for feminists in the 60s and 70s. They pushed this domestic violence narrative that feminism was necessary because the men are the threat. The husbands and the dads are the threat. They're going to abuse the women and they're going to abuse the children because the women can't leave. Well, if you look at the data of the last 40 years collected by the federal government in America, so it's not just 1 or 2 organizations. They source this data from all over, from all the other organizations that collect the data, from emergency rooms, police reports, court records. It's like the most comprehensive data set you can find. And by every single metric, fathers and husbands are the least likely to abuse the women and children. Who is the most likely to abuse the women and children? The mothers are the number 1 person. And what feminists try to say to me about this is, well, that's because they're the ones spending all the time with the kids. If that were true, this is very easy to find out if they're correct. If that were true, we should see those numbers start to shift, because over the last 40 years, men have gotten more time with their children. They've gotten more custody, more parenting time with their children. We should see that number start to shift if now more men are spending more time with the children, and we have not seen that number move at all.
Do you think that is mainly due to the fact that the attack on women is from all sides, and there's a lot of women who are in disarray? They're constantly fed with these structures that give them false beliefs, false principles. They use logical fallacies as willy-nilly all over the place, we would say. Is it because they're being attacked from all sides, and so they're just so stressed and they don't know what's up and what's down anymore? Because I find a lot of people are just kind of... women have a habit of just switching off and getting on with things, and so not complaining. And men, they habitually complain about stuff and try and like shake their fist at things and shout at people. Is it just that women are just under assault all the time?
Well, that's a big part of it. If you're forced to live with constant cognitive dissonance, yes, it makes life very frustrating and difficult to deal with. But it's more than that. Women overall are more likely to just have negative emotional experiences. We're far more prone to mental illness. So like in the United States, 26% of all adult women are on at least one prescription psychiatric medication. Those medications were developed and tested under the MK Ultra programs. I don't think they do for people what they say they do. That aside, that's kind of a separate issue, but women are also just, we have hormonal shifts all the time that men don't experience. Men have like a 24-hour hormone cycle, whereas women, we have big dips and valleys. We have postpartum hormonal shifts. We have perimenopausal hormonal shifts. Those things are real. And we tell women, oh, you can do everything like a man can do. You can just act like a man. You can get up every morning and you go have a corporate career and you can take all this pressure and you can have kids and you can have it all and you can have it all at the same time. And yes, that's very difficult, but generally, just historically, men tend to be a stabilizing force within the family. Women are very important. Mothers are very important. Neither you or I would ever say they're not. But without that stabilizing force of having the man who can kind of step in, I know this for myself, right? I'm a pretty rational person, especially for a female. But there's plenty of times where my husband has to kind of step in when I'm getting all hysterical, and he goes, listen, just take a break. You know, he kind of comes in as this stabilizing force, and he's like, let's deal with the problem at hand. Let's figure out a solution. That's a great thing. And we don't have parents working together anymore. Women see men as like their opposition, you know, and if there's a problem, the first thing they do is try to kick the man out of the home. And what happens then? Some other man's going to come in. And what the data shows is that these other men, there's great stepfathers out there. I'm not saying stepdads are bad. There are wonderful men who come in and become that stabilizing parental force I was just talking about, but there's also a large cohort of predators who see single moms as easy targets. And if you're a predator and you want access to children, single moms are probably the easiest way to get that access. So like that Substack piece I was just talking about goes over all this data. And it just very objectively analyzes all the different pieces of it. And it shows overwhelmingly that by removing husbands and removing fathers, you put women and children at far, far greater risk by a factor of 10 to 12 times. So this narrative that your husband is going to be the threat, that if you don't have feminism, your husband might beat you, or he'll become some kind of raging alcoholic and cheat on you and you won't be able to leave, or he'll beat the children. It's just false. There are bad men, there are bad women, but removing fathers and husbands from the home has put the most vulnerable people at far greater risk. It has not helped to protect them. And that was the promise that feminism made to us, that women and children would be protected. And that is a false claim. All of the data shows that it's not only false, but that it has put women and children at far greater risk. This is why you're seeing things like such higher rates of human trafficking in the world now compared to even 100 years ago. We have more slavery and more human trafficking in the world now than we did 200 years ago, and people don't even know that. They're not even aware of the fact. And if you ask people, they'll say, oh, overpopulation is the risk, when depopulation is the risk. So the propaganda we're sold is not reality. And most of what I'm trying to do with my work on this, especially on the feminism stuff, is just to give people the real picture. I'm not trying to persuade you that you must stay home and have 5 children and homeschool them the way I did. I just want you to know, hey, this has been sold to you as something you need to protect you and give you a better life and a better chance. And that's not what it is. So let's actually look at what it really is, what it's really done, who was behind it, and why they wanted it. You know, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Now, let's go. So I want to do 2 things. First of all, I want to find out a little bit more about how you actually started, like the moments you started the research or realize that you're a researcher and realize that you're going to have to write this all down and realize all of that. That's something I find personally interesting. I love to find out people's specific moment where how old were they, where were they, what was, because you always find an interesting point in someone's life by there. But I also want to find out a bit about, probably go a little bit forward and to post-war, post-World War II feminism, because I think it was really 47, 48, and then 67 were massive moments in not only history all over the West, all over the world, but especially within things like the feminist. So where did you start off? When was the moment where you turned from intrigued mum who's looking around going, okay, this is now pissing me off that everybody keeps doing the same things over again, and now I need to understand something. When was the moment you started, and what like sparked that?
Well, I think for me it was my own personal experience, right, of doing things. I followed the boomer blueprint for life to a degree, right? I was raised by parents who have 6 divorces between them. They told me it was perfectly fine for me to live with my boyfriend in high school. And he was a nice guy and all of that, but we believed this, like, oh, marriage is just a piece of paper. It's really not important. We love each other. That's enough. And then we had 2 kids, and it turns out it wasn't enough. It wasn't my choice. It was his choice. He had a bit of a personal crisis and left. And I found myself alone at 22 with 2 kids, and everybody said, see, this is why you need feminism, because the men are bad and the men are going to leave. And at that point, I didn't know what to really think about it, but I kind of felt like, yeah, but wouldn't this have been more preventable had I, done things the way grandma did? Because I remember I had grandma saying, oh, don't live with your boyfriend. That's a terrible idea. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. But my parents were saying it's fine. I didn't listen to grandma, unfortunately. And I remember thinking, what if I listened to grandma and I had said, no, we're not going to live together until we get married. I don't want to give you a baby until we get married. And I'm sure that you want to stay with me and I want to stay with you, and we're going to do this together. So I thought about that. And then I got married to another guy and had a child with him. Once again, it didn't work out and he left. He got himself into legal trouble, took off. And now here I am with 3 children by 2 guys, and I was never promiscuous. I didn't do what all my college friends did, which was go off and ride the carousel, right? I only ever wanted like this committed family that was going to last forever, because I didn't have that growing up, and that's what I wanted. And I was sitting there thinking, how did I fail at this so miserably? I had the best of intentions. I thought I was doing what was right. I wasn't promiscuous. I was loyal. I didn't cheat. How did I end up here? Like, how did this happen? It's not what I intended. And I could have taken that moment and said, well, it's just the men. The men are just bad. I picked 2 bad guys in a row, and this is what happens because men are just bad. But then I thought, wait a minute. These 2 guys are nothing alike. The only common denominator here is me. I can't control other people, but I can look at myself and figure out, why did I do this? How do I fix this? How do I prevent, like, whatever it was about me that got me here, how do I fix that going forward? And that's a very scary question that most people don't want to ask. It's very hard to look at yourself and wonder what it was that you could have done that made your life kind of a mess, right? And so it started with that, and with me kind of going, okay, maybe I wasn't promiscuous or anything, but I did do these things. I did choose to do it this way, and it didn't work out, and why? And it did get me thinking about like the current social questions and things like family court and looking at my parents. So the beginning of the research was back then, but I didn't get super deep into it until later, because luckily for me, since I did do that introspection and I fixed some issues within myself, I found the guy of my dreams. I've been with him for 18 years now. We have 2 children together. Would not recommend my life path to everyone. People seem to think that I think I'm this bastion of purity that everybody should follow. No, I screwed things up horribly in my 20s. Wasn't my intention, had the greatest of intentions, but that doesn't really matter, right? So lucky for me, I did find this wonderful guy. I did get this family that I wanted, and I have a wonderful family life and a fantastic marriage now. And about 5 years ago, my kids were getting old enough. They're all, graduating, and they're starting to move out. And I said to my husband, what should I do? Like, after this era, when I've got the empty nest, what should I start doing to prepare for that, for those years? And like, what do you think I should do? You know me better than anybody. What do you think? And he's like, when we have conversations about the feminist stuff, I think there's important things that you have to say about that. You should maybe like write a book or
Oh,
something.
what a traitor to mankind. Oh, what a terrible traitor. I tell you what, you should be a feminist. Suppress us a little, why don't you?
He said, maybe write a book about that or something. And I had other friends that were like, you should do writing, you should do, because I used to spend some time arguing on Facebook with different people, and they'd say, you should take these posts and like make a book or something. So I thought, oh, I could try that. Probably no one will ever read it besides maybe like my dad and my husband, but maybe my kids will enjoy it. So I kind of had it in mind that I was writing it for my kids and grandkids to read someday, about like what this crazy life was like in this time period growing up with the feminism stuff. So I started doing research, and I thought it was going to be about the economics and the funding and the suffrage laws and all that kind of stuff. And it is. There's a lot of that in the book. But as I started profiling the different feminists from first wave all the way through, which took me about 2.5 years. You're digging into all their bios, you're going on Project Gutenberg to find their original writings and look up what they actually said. And I found this incredible common thread that very many of them, even if they said that they were Christian, they were into occult stuff. They were into occult practices, they were into spirit mediums, tarot card reading, automatic writing. Automatic writing was huge in first wave.
Wow, automatic
huge.
writing.
Most of the feminists from first wave claimed to do some type of automatic writing. And I thought, well, that's super bizarre. I can't overlook that. And then I get into the period you were talking about, like post-World War II, and I'm looking at the founding of the UN, and that they used Alice Bailey as like a central figure, in forming the UN. And
Eleanor Roosevelt was very involved.
Yes, and it claims to be a secular organization, but it's not. If you look into some of the like Findhorn and the different NGOs that are involved, they definitely have a spiritual practice. There's a
Don't
room
they have
in the
theosophy?
UN.
Isn't theosophy officially the
Yes, it is.
That is baffling. It's baffling,
isn't it?
Yeah.
And you think of all the world religions, why? And then you look into theosophy, you look into, Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, and a lot of them were intelligence agents, and there's so much crazy stuff. That's why I
why
found
does
out.
the name Lucifer keep coming up in all of this stuff all of the time? I don't understand. I wasn't reading something like that before, but now it's just Lucifer.
That's exactly right. And if you look back at the writings of the suffragists, they officially thought of Lucifer as their liberator. Oh. There's actually a PhD thesis written by a guy in Sweden named Per Faxneld that I cite in my book. He wrote this huge tome about it. Now, he's a Satanist himself, so he sees it as a good thing. I don't, but he and I come to a lot of the same conclusions about women's liberation, beginning as a Luciferian doctrine, an anti-Christian doctrine. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton says herself in her writings that she does not believe any man ever talked to God. She does not believe that the Bible is inspired. She believes it's a tool of oppression that men created to oppress women, and that's why she rewrote the Bible with her friends in 1895. You can buy it on Amazon to this day. It's called The Woman's Bible, and it's 38 anti-Christian suffragettes in America rewriting the Bible from their own perspective, from a feminist perspective. And it was a bestseller at the time.
I want to read it. You sold it to me. I want to read it. It's going to be fantastic.
It will blow your hair back, Johnny.
I know. I don't think I want to read it now, but I'm going to have to.
So bad. It's so bad. And I'm just reading this, and these women, the people who they were working with, the people who printed their stuff, like their publishing houses, their funding, all came from people who were supposed to be Christian ministers. And of course, if you look into it, they're more like Unitarians, Quakers, things like this. So I got a lot into all of that and what it means in my book. But just to say, like, yes, it was it was openly Luciferian. Matilda Joslyn Gage, one of the most popular suffragists, with one of their most prolific writers, she was the inspiration for Glenda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz. Her son-in-law, L. Frank Baum, wrote The Wizard of Oz. And she was a huge influence on him. He lived with her for many years, and she would tell him about how Christianity was this tool of oppression against women. And so no, it's just nothing like what we've told it
It's
was.
like how Bond was written by intelligence agents. Wizards
Exactly.
of Oz was written by wizards, witches.
Yes, exactly. And of
That is
course, so
ridiculous.
they make the witch into the liberator.
Can I ask? There's a question. You say you were saying something there that really made me. I think it's a bit that I when you said that they suddenly all of these women they in early 1900s or whatever, and they suddenly there's this Luciferian bent to it all. Do you think that is just like Hegelian dialectical forming because there's this power structure, so automatically women are like, we see the power structure and it is associated with God, and it just they form themselves into Hegelian dialectical. They create, it's like almost a vacuum sucks them. Just those people taking that position sucks the other people, and that's how they form. It's not purposeful a lot of the time. It's just they become an equal and opposing force to the what they visualize as oppression. Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah, I would say that's spot on. It is definitely the Hegelian dialectic, but I think Hegel was latching onto something that's ancient. This is a very ancient idea, the one and the many, and the dualism, and ancient ideas about hierarchies. Those at the bottom of hierarchies, or anyone who's not at the top of the hierarchy, is going to question that, and it can be a good thing. It depends on how you handle the question, right? But it is a very natural thing, I think, to take whatever your grievances are in life, look at the power structure, assign those grievances as being caused by the power structure, and so the natural reaction is to say it must be dismantled. And so this is how you get this Marxist feminism, which is what my next book is about, where it's really about total inversion. They wanted complete and total inversion. There's probably one of the greatest villains of history is named Alexandra Kollontai. She was one of the top Bolsheviks, one of the first women to have a high government appointment. Very good, close pals with Lenin. She was an intelligence asset herself, which nobody has really ever. I'm kind of the first person to prove this, I believe. Maybe somewhere in the world somebody has before me, and I just didn't know about it. But I've talked to, Professor Richard Spence and a bunch of other people who have some expertise in this area, and I think I'm the first person to weave this together, that she was. They could never figure out why Stalin let her live. He purged all the other old Bolsheviks, but he let her live, and they thought maybe it was just misogyny. He wasn't threatened by her because she was a woman, but he killed plenty of women. So I don't think it was that. And what we found out is that she was reporting troop movements in Germany and things like that to him, and he made her ambassador in Sweden and in Norway at various points in her career. Anyway, this woman is responsible for pretty much the whole basis of the Marxist feminist ethos that now completely controls Western universities. It is, she studied with the Fabians when she was young. She traveled to Germany, Italy, England, France, traveled around Europe learning from the Fabian Marxists, and wrote at length. She was one of the great propagandists of the 20th century for the Bolsheviks. And all of her writing is about free love, promiscuity, that, sex work is good. She was kind of this original sex positive person. Of course, she framed it as, oh, I just really care about prostitutes. I just care about how they're abused. But it was this she was the first person to institute no-fault divorce. When she came to power as the Commissar for Social Welfare in the Bolshevik regime, the first thing she did was get rid of marriage as a religious institution, completely separated it from the church. She said it's just a license now that you apply for. You can dissolve it at will for any reason. You don't need a reason. And unilaterally, which was unheard of at this time. It used to be that if you wanted a divorce, you had to have cause. You had to, if both parties didn't agree, you had to go before a judge, things like this. It wasn't so easy to just dissolve the family. And she was the first person to really conceive of marriage as just this thing that doesn't really matter. And what she ultimately wanted, and they did test this in Soviet Russia, she wanted children to be raised communally, not knowing who their biological father was. Why? Because property was passed down through the father. And she said, you should not have any allegiance to your father. Lenin should be your father.
Oh, wow.
The
Call him
state,
daddy.
she literally said the state is your daddy.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So she
Wow,
wanted
that is sex.
children should be raised communally in creches, that mothers and fathers don't have rights to the children, that every woman must think of her children as everyone's child is your child, and your child is everyone's child. You know, that she wrote about this at length, and her ideas were really absorbed and adopted and pushed into all of the universities, and this is where a lot of this stuff comes from. She was also the first to make abortion not only legal, but paid for by the state in state hospitals. So you could get free abortion in state hospitals in Russia. And it got so bad, they only had this policy for about 9.5 years because there were 3 abortions for every 1 live birth in Russia by the time Stalin took power, and he said, we've got to put an end to that or there won't be a Russia. We're already being killed by war and famine. This abortion stuff's got to stop. So he stopped it for that reason, but Russia has never recovered. They still have the highest abortion rates in the world. It's just, of all the demonic things, I can't think of anything more horrible than to tell women that liberation is murdering your own children. But really, when you get into her philosophy, it's about being able to terminate the man's child. Mm-hmm. It's about giving women the power to say, no, I don't like you anymore, so this baby I'm pregnant with, oh, that's done. You know what I mean? It's really more about that for her.
I mean, I think we might have discussed this slightly just before just beforehand, before I pressed record, or I'm not sure if we talked about it while we've been recording, but I've been really obsessed with the idea of permanent revolution within Marxism in general, and how that sort of like it is in every single part of Marxism. And so is that what we see deployed in these movements, in like feminism, is a constant revolution against whatever for the sake of revolution? There's no actual, it's like it allows for a state to destabilize everybody at an individual level so everybody can be controlled.
Yeah. It's even worse than that if you read the writings of a lot of these folks. For Kollontai, she said that the revolution would never end until we conquered the final frontier of revolution, which was human biology. So she was writing in 1919 about transhumanism and about overcoming nature and destroying God and becoming transhuman, overcoming our biology. She saw a future where there was no gender. Does that sound familiar? Anyone? Margaret Fuller in the West was writing about this. She's a member of the Transcendental Club. In the 1840s, Margaret Fuller is writing about gender as a spectrum and how in the future we should abolish gender and there won't be males and there won't be females. So all peppered throughout the feminist writings is this idea of revolution until we're no longer human, essentially, until we overcome our biology.
And the first gender to attack is female.
Yes. Well, it's really both. So they attack females and they attack males as well. They attack females as if you're feminine, you're weak, you're a loser. I've been told this my whole life, right? That by focusing on motherhood and being submissive to my husband and having him lead the family and trusting him, that makes me weak. I'm stupid, I'm naive, I'm weak. I never did anything with my life. I haven't achieved anything. I'll die a loser that history forgot. Never mind the fact that I've created 5 human beings who hopefully will go off and have their own children and so on and so forth. And my genetics will go off into the future, and hopefully whatever I've raised my kids with will go off into the future and impact the world infinitely more than any career I could have. But they attack women in this way, that motherhood is the thing that kneecaps you and holds you back. And then they attack men by saying, oh, any type of masculinity is toxic. Any kind of boundaries you have as a man are abusive. Almost anything a man does today is framed as abuse. If you have any sort of boundaries with a woman and you say, I won't accept this behavior, that's abusive now. So what's happened to men? men are just like checking out. They don't want to do dating in families. They know they're going to get nailed in family court. They know that if they build a life with a woman, she can just walk away with it on a whim for any reason because she just woke up and thought you were mean that day. So it's all about, it gets very philosophical, and I try not to go too deep into this because I feel like I lose people, but it's all about dissolving boundaries. It's all about eliminating the image of God. It's about destroying the natural order. It's really about hatred of humanity, hatred of God, and hatred of this world. And that's where you see a lot of Gnosticism and occultism and things like this come in. That's why they're so tied together.
For all my experiences, I completely agree. In through all my life, I've had really strange experiences. I mean, I was brought up in the 17th century. I say that to people and they go, "Ha!" and they don't really understand. But I was in the Sealed Knot. It was a 17th century reenactment society. It was like 8,000 people on a campsite every weekend, and there was cannons and there was swords, and we were living in the 17th century. There was a castle next to us, and we didn't have any TV or anything, so we're just roaming around the field, fighting with sticks. Kids just allowed and kind of safe to go off into the campsites. But within that sort of community, because you got like, I live a normal life in the weekdays, but on the weekend, I'm around these people who are, flamboyant and they like to show off and do. So you also saw a lot of what the esoteric arts being practiced all around there. There was a lot. And of course, there was a thing. My dad actually did witch burning. So we went round, Carew Castle, Pembroke Castle. We used to go to West Wales. There's a local fair, and then we do a big witch burning. The Parliamentarian Army would march up. It was a regiment of about, let's say, 75 to 100 people would come along, and they're bullying a town, and they pick one of the women and they burn her as a witch in front of everybody. And it's like flares, real fire. It looked very good and stuff. But it kind of comes into this, we constantly got these ideas. And it's almost like the occult is the ultimate way to revolt against man itself. Yeah. And this is we got to go on to talk about that. We got to go on to talk about the occult side of it. I find it extremely interesting. I've come across it myself in my Black Hand series, which I'm looking at the satanic sex parties of people like Horace Dibbin and Mariella Novotny and the people who were hanging around with the Perfumo affair, and where they come from, and the intelligence links to it all. And
yes,
I mean, it's just so fascinating. So I don't know where to start. You've written a whole book about it. Where would you start with occultism and feminism and the merger of the two?
Well, it's very bizarre. Like you just said, anybody who starts researching this kind of stuff, you always find three elements. You find the occult, you find intelligence apparatuses, and then you find, what's the third? Occultism, intelligence, and organized crime.
Oh, yeah.
These three...
The craze
seem to pop up everywhere, I mean, if you look into the history of the Vatican, you're going to find all of this. If you look into MK Ultra, you're going to find all of this. There's like all kinds of places in history where you start investigating what went on, who were the people involved, what were their ideas, and where did they get their ideas. It's always tied up with this stuff. So feminism, with Gloria Steinem, very much bound up with intelligence operations, even going back much before that. I mean, in the American Civil War, they used suffragettes to get across the Mason-Dixon line with intelligence information. They could sew it into their skirts and things like this and cross the line saying that they were, nursing, or they were bringing food or things like that. It was very easy to use women to do espionage. Same thing with the Bolshevik Revolution. The main reason there were so many female Bolsheviks is because they were very easy to use for these kind of intelligence purposes. So they would purposefully recruit women from the universities because, number one, it's very easy to radicalize a young woman. It's easy to radicalize a young man too, but oh my goodness, find a young woman with daddy issues and it's like, you can get her to do it. You can get her to fight and die on your beat. And they did. They had female assassins. They had female spies. Honey traps are a tale as old as time. So it was no exception with feminism, right? Gloria Steinem was used to disseminate feminist propaganda in India, in Europe, at a lot of the festivals they had there, and things like that. And the occult stuff, I think the reason it's so appealing is because you have like this historical dialectic between God and Lucifer. And if you look into a lot of occult belief, Lucifer is seen more as a liberator, that he was on the side of humankind, that God has this knowledge and he's a big meanie. He's a dad who doesn't want you to party, right? He's your mean dad who doesn't want you to party and doesn't want you to have the secret knowledge so that you can become a god. And so the whole occult side of things is, from my view as an Orthodox Christian, I know everybody here may not be of that same belief, so please don't be offended if I'm offending you here. But from
people who are offended, boo. No, you'll be all right. They'll be all right.
From my view as a Christian, this is a pride issue. It's a pride issue of, and you find this in all these revolutionaries. It basically boils down to, you're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do, right? So the appeal of the occult is this idea of, oh, well, what if I get the secret knowledge? Then I'm the boss. Then I dictate what happens. I've got the power, right? I can use these esoteric arts to gain power for myself or gain things for myself, even if it means manipulating the will of others. You know, I'm justified in doing that because I'm oppressed, because I've been the victim of something. So these ideas are all tied in together. You kind of have to have this, and I think a lot of us do when we're young. When we're young, we're trying to figure things out. We're trying to find our way. And so it's very seductive when you're young, especially, to get into occultism of various forms, because you're trying to rebel against your father and you're trying to have your own power and you're trying to forge your own path in life. And you become a revolutionary. It's almost impossible not to. So in all of these revolutionary groups, whether it be the American Revolution and the Freemasons, whether it be the Bolsheviks, and they had a lot of really bizarre occult groups and sex parties that they had, almost every revolutionary group, you're going to find occult beliefs, because it just fits with that worldview. It fits with that paradigm. And you're going to find a lot of espionage and intelligence, because it's secret knowledge, right? And it's like, we're going to take down these oppressors, and we're going to, it's a very sneaky thing. You have to be, revolutionaries have to be sneaky, and they have to have intelligence, and they have to have secrets. And so these things just kind of all go together, is what I've found in my research, because of the common mindset, the common worldview that they have.
Is this somehow to do with doing things for the sake of it gives you power and makes things manifest? I'll explain this in like people just I know lots of girls who, when I was young, were like, don't know what to do. This really indecisive, couldn't make up their mind at all, much more than the guys. The guys were like, oh, let's go do this. And the girls were like, I'm not sure what to do all the time. And if you suddenly learn how to focus that, it appears to you yourself as though you've suddenly got power, because you make things happen by actually making a decision. But that decision is something that you've decided, the card or the spell or the whatever has told you to do this, and so you do it, where before you wouldn't have done it because you're indecisive. And then that power is just like it teaches people that they can do things and things manifest from it. Is that just as simple as it is?
Well, I think that's a big part of it. I do think there is, I do believe in the spiritual realm, and I do think there is something to this sort of stuff. And the way I write about it in my book, when a lot of these suffragists, let's see, who's a good example? Mrs. Satan herself. What was her name? There's so many of them I get mixed up. But this was a woman who was a suffragist. The press here in the United States dubbed her Mrs. Satan, because she was all about free love, and she got into all kinds of criminal trouble selling fake cancer cures.
Whoa. Yeah, go on anyway.
Yeah, there's all these old newspaper articles you can find about her, and they have her drawn with the bat wings and everything. She would sell fake cancer cures. She was a total scam artist. She was the first person in the United States to publish the Communist Manifesto in English. Isn't that crazy? And she really made a name for herself and built this publishing company, and also the first stock trading company owned by a woman, because she had a ring of prostitutes who were spies for her. And they would collect intelligence from guys on Wall Street that they were sleeping
God,
with.
this sounds like Gloria Steinem.
It's very
similar. Like what you're saying there is just like go on, keep going.
But in the 1880s,
so
her job, what she did was she went to New York and she found Cornelius Vanderbilt and she became friends with him, and she started feeding him stock trading information from this spy ring that she had. But what she would say is that she was contacting spirits, ancient spirits, that they would talk to her and that she was a spirit medium. And whether or not
That's
Vanderbilt
cheating.
Believed this, who knows? I don't know if he really believes it, but her intelligence information helped him game the stock market in one of the first big crashes, and he made millions. And the newspapers came to him the day after the crash, and they said, how are you the only person who actually like made a fortune off of this when everybody else has just lost their ass?
I'm listening to this mad woman with bat wings.
He said, do as I do and consult the spirits. So, like, are they using witchcraft, or are they just giant scammers? Probably no one will ever know. But the fact that they can tie the two together, the fact that they would say and insist that they were spirit mediums and that they were contacting entities, they may have been. We don't know. I mean, Margaret Sanger did this. Margaret Sanger was gallivanting around Europe having orgies with famous intellectuals while her children were in hippie communes where one of them died. Her daughter died while left in the care of some random hippies at some commune she left her in. And she did have some guilt over it. So she started doing seances and getting into Rosicrucianism and trying to contact the spirit of her dead daughter and things like this.
Oh, fuck. I'm sorry. That's heavy. That's like, oh, my daughter died. I left in a comment. I feel guilt. What are you going to do? Black magic.
Let's have a seance. Let's get into some black magic. Exactly. But I mean, and the circles she was in were, these people all did this. They were some of the first people to be, tripping on ayahuasca and doing these seances and stuff like that. And you see it repeated. Isn't it a bizarre cycle how you just see it repeat over and over? So like we have people around the Victorian era taking ayahuasca tea, which was pretty new to the West at the time, like Aldous Huxley and some of these guys were some of the first ones to be really experimenting with it. And then later we get into the 60s and 70s, and these same feminists are all, doing LSD and hanging out with the CIA and disseminating feminist propaganda there. And then we look now, you can look right now at something called Witch Talk. You go on TikTok and there's a hashtag. Oh my
God,
called Witch Talk.
Of course there is.
And it's all these like radical feminists. A lot of them are trans or non-binary now, and they're doing the same things. They will tell you how instructional step-by-steps on how to have a ritual abortion, how to use hallucinogenic drugs and Wiccan or witchcraft rituals to make your abortion into a magic ritual so that you can get things you want for yourself in life. I did a whole stream about this with a friend. And again, the research for it was just awful. It was like, I was thinking, why do I do this to myself? Like, this is so awful. Why do I even put myself through this? But we're just seeing it repeat. People think this is new. You look at Witch Talk and you think this is brand new stuff. And it's like, no, we can go back to the 1800s and there were women channeling spirits and doing automatic writing and having ritual abortions. Matilda Joslyn Gage wrote about this, about how abortion was a rite of passage in a lot of pagan cultures, and that we should go back to that. So then you can go back to ancient Rome and see that they had pagan ritual abortion. A lot of like tribes in New Zealand do, Indian tribes in the United States do. In fact, here, when they overturned Roe v. Wade, multiple Indian tribes objected to the overturn of Roe v. Wade and some of the states putting restrictions on abortion because they said, this is a ritual religious rite for us. This is an ancient practice. It's a religious rite. You cannot tell me I cannot have an abortion. So these ideas are new, but they're ancient. They've always been around. I personally think it's the same spirits behind them. I think it's the same kind of demons behind these ideas. You know, Moloch, the Old Testament, all this stuff. And we're just seeing it repeat. So one of the things that you learn when you do this research is that there really is nothing new under the sun, and that these ideas go back as far as human beings go back, and that they repeat and repeat and repeat. And it's what you start to see when you zoom out that far is that this is a big spiritual battle. It's spiritual warfare. And feminism is one of the greatest tools of spiritual warfare, going back to the Garden of Eden, to pit man against woman, to whisper in the woman's ear and tell her that God is the bad guy and she shouldn't listen to her husband and things like this, you know. And people attack me and they get very upset and they think I'm trying to oppress women, or that I want to gain points with the boys, or I'm a pick-me, or all these sort of things. But really what I'm trying to do is get through to women and help them understand this is not, these people don't have good intentions. They don't just care about you and want you to have nice things and have a nice life. That's not what it's about. And I think if you look at how most women are today, I don't see a lot of like prosperity and thriving and women doing really well. I see women, you know, struggling and having a hard time, and mental illness is like off the charts. Women's health has gone downhill in a lot of ways, and now we're arguing over whether men can be women and whether men can beat the crap out of women in sports. And it's just like, just the inversion is obvious to me, but I know that it's not to everybody else. So that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of help people see it.
It is extraordinary stuff. I know. Tell you something from my own, because my mum always liked that sort of stuff. Before I was born, she was into tarot, and she had a really good friend. She gave her a reading. And it was really bad, and then that friend committed suicide. I think it was like a couple of weeks later. And so she never did tarot again. But as she had more negative things go throughout her life, she turned more to spiritualism in a way that was psychic readings, etc., and things like this. And the communities, she used to go down to the spooky church. Still around. We call it a church, of course. She made me make a CD for them back in about 2001 or something, 2002, really early on. She was like, "Can you make us? We need 2 songs, and we've only got a CD player. I Just Called to Say I Love You by Stevie Wonder and Angels by Robbie Williams." And
goodness!
And all of them were all of the people who were going there were desperately sad because they had lost someone. All of them were just the most vulnerable people. And I saw loads of things, and I experienced things. I mean, I experienced certain things where it was, if I wasn't logical minded, then I could go down to this point where the more I looked at how they saw the world and what they were practicing, they were looking into a dark space they didn't understand and waiting for an answer that they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so there's no answers there. There's no, it literally, all it does is waste your living life, wastes the time that you've got to actually live. Because if you're going to sit there and try and communicate with the dead, you are just dead. Surely there'll be a time to communicate with the dead after life. But I think that's where the afterlife bit comes in. But there is, like, it seems to be that it was all women, and it was all women because women were it was very clear they were all in very bad state, and they lived in a way where they felt really like they didn't have anyone around them, and they, most of them have been in failing relationships or the like, and end up looking for solace in a place that is comfortable with a community who can give them answers that they can't actually get. Because, the worst part and the most difficult part of going through traumatic experiences as a man or a woman is the fact that there are no answers for most of it. You've got to learn how to change your perspective and your attitude, and you need to learn to get over things you need to learn you're a new person eventually. and
Yes.
you go through cycles in that sense. But what I used to see within these circles were a lot of people who seemed very sad, looking into darkness, hoping to see a light. And
Yeah.
that's what the majority. But then there's a really vindictive people who hang out in there because they realize that everybody's so vulnerable that they can get power, but they themselves are usually a little bit psychologically off, and they come in and cause the trouble. Have you actually done any, like, have you seen what it's like in the real world today now? What witchcraft is like? Do you know if there's like that sort of thing going on in your community?
Oh, yeah. It's huge. So it's one of the fastest growing religions, witchcraft is. There's a huge pagan revival. I just did a paper that I presented at an academic conference on the pagan revival and how it's related to feminism. So yes, it's hugely popular. That's why like that witch talk hashtag has many, many millions of impressions on it. It's super popular. You see like a lot of female gurus on YouTube, like Teal Swan and some of these like charismatic women, these charismatic female preacher types, like the one that Trump has right now. Paula White, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's very, I understand why it's happening. I understand why we're gravitating to, you even see this with like a lot of the pop stars. They'll say, like Beyonce says she has an alter ego that she becomes on stage named Sasha Fierce, and that she's channeling spirits, and that's why she's such a great performer. This stuff is really popular.
LeBron's doing all the signs, doing all of the movements. Or there are many of them. There are many. Yeah. There's many signs. I completely agree. I just don't know. I spend all my time in the past nowadays. I look up and I realize, oh God, I forgot about that. I forgot that there's like loads of people doing stuff, and it's almost exactly the same as what was going on in the past.
It really is. It's a lot like it was in the past, and I think that's one of the reasons, like, a lot of people think history is boring. Oh, it's not boring. If you look, history is anything but boring. It's wild and it's crazy, and you when you really research it, you realize that we're the same. Like, the people back then are the same as now, and we have the same struggles, and life is about these same spiritual struggles. And the thing about Christianity is that the two pillars of Christianity are humility and repentance. And those two things are what keep you from staring into that black darkness you were talking about, thinking you can pull out the answers and you can figure it out, and that if you just manifest and if you just manipulate and you take charge, that you can create the reality that you want. And what humility does is prevent you from trying to do that. And it does what you were saying, which is to realize that ultimately the problems are within ourselves, right? That we have to change our perspective, that we have to change our attitude, that we have to look at ourselves and not look at the world. And this is what every young revolutionary does. They look at the world and they go, I'm going to fix it. I think this is why Jordan Peterson, although I disagree with him on quite a few things, why one of the things about him that made him so popular early on was that he was one of the first people in a while to come along and say, what makes you think you're, as a 20-year-old, going to fix the world, right? That you know how things should be run. You're going to fix it all. You're going to, you can't even clean your room, but you want to topple the hierarchy. You want to disband governments. You want to remake the world in your image. Why? And it's the hubris and the pride of youth, but some of us never let go of that. And if you get into these occult practices, I think you do get very caught up in believing that you're the God. And it's a central tenet of occultism, that God's within you, that you ultimately are God, and that if you just master these rituals or these arts, that you can create the reality that you want for yourself. And another thing I found in profiling all these women was that almost all of them, to the extent that they were involved in the occult, was the extent to which their life had a horrible end. Like, a lot of them died alone, suffering, from cancer, from horrible disease, died in horrible ways, just awful things. Like, who was the feminist poet who died from suicide putting her head in the stove?
Oh my God. Oh,
What's her name?
I've heard of this,
I'm
but I
drawing a
don't.
blank.
I know I'm not going to be
I
able
mean, if you
to.
take like feminist literature, she's like the hero, the 20th century, like 1940s and 50s poet. She had an occultist husband. I don't know why my brain isn't working today, Johnny, and I can't pull names out of my brain like I normally can. I'm usually like really snappy. Maybe it's because I've had the flu for like
Witchcraft, I
5 weeks.
say. They put in a mist on you.
I know someone will listen to this and they'll be like shouting her name at me, trying to help me out. But I'm just saying, like, to the extent that these women did this, they usually met a pretty horrible end, and they had a very tragic end to their life, and uh, either weren't remembered or weren't remembered well. And it's like something that I personally took a lesson from watching these women trying to do this. Like Florence Farr was this like great feminist actress around the Victorian period, and she became like one of the first female high priestesses in the Golden Dawn and had her own kind of her own occult religion within it. She went to India and tried to, teach it there, and she died of like horrible cancer, like this kind of cancer that just like ate her alive slowly, and she suffered so much and had just a terrible, and she died alone. She never had children. She completely rejected marriage on the basis that she thought it was slavery, and so she just died like alone in poverty in India of a horrible disease. And it's just, these people think that these demonic entities are going to help them, and they don't realize that every person, like throughout all of human history, who thought that they're going to be the one that figures this out. I'll figure this out. I'll trick the demons. I'll come out on top here. You never do, and you never will.
Massive amount of hubris attached.
Yeah.
Not Virginia Woolf, is it?
No. Oh, goodness sakes, Rachel, where's my book?
Where's my book? Where's my book? I'll
I think I've given away all my copies.
Oh no! Oh, you can't give away all your copies.
I constantly do that. I constantly give away my book. I order myself some and then I give them away.
Kind of a good person, that is, going around giving out things.
Although Virginia Woolf was pretty messed up too.
Yeah. That's right.
Emily Dickinson, Sylvia Plath. Goodness sakes, Sylvia Plath. I have a whole piece about her on my Substack. I don't know why I couldn't remember her name, but yeah, she horrible depression her entire life. Dabbled in the occult all the time. She wrote, she wrote poems about Pan and contacting the god Pan and using Ouija boards and different types of rituals and witchcraft practices, and ended up dying by, she taped her children into the bedroom while they were asleep, sealed off their bedroom, opened up her oven, stuck her head inside, and gassed herself to death. Oh. And then,
there was something about that worse. Back then. Go on. I mean, you started, so you should finish.
Well, that story gets even worse because the guy she was with, what was his name? This is so unlike me. I usually can always...
I feel your pain as someone who does a lot of writing, spends a lot of time looking. Every time I go on a podcast, there's always one name.
Yeah, usually I'm really with it, but I was sick for like 5.5 weeks, and I'm just still not cognitively all there. It was that horrible flu everyone's had. Ted Hughes was her love interest for most of her life, and they were kind of on again, off again, and they had a child together. But after Sylvia died that way with the oven, the woman Ted Hughes was having an affair with, this is why Sylvia killed herself. She found out he was having an affair with another woman and had a child with her, and so she killed herself. And then Ted's new wife that he was having the affair with killed herself and their child the same way. Some years later. Yep, she put a mattress in the kitchen, laid down with the child who was only 3-4 years old, and turned the oven on, and they both died that way. And, this is a man who was a very known and very involved occultist, and I just feel like I see this pattern over and over. I don't usually see these people live a long, happy life and die surrounded by family peacefully and things like, it's not usually what you see. It's usually like this horrific and tragic ending.
Yeah, so. I think the occult leads people to extremely tragic endings. So you've written one book. You're going on to write a second one. When do you think that one's going to be done then? Because that must be a long process going.
Well, it's like 85% done, so I've just got to get it finished. I've had like family things. I always put my family first, so I've been taking care of some family members who've needed care for the last 9 months. I think that is slowly starting to get sorted out to the point where I will have the time to finish it this year. I want to have it out by the end of 2025, because if people thought the first book was crazy, the second book is even crazier, because it does dive into a lot of the more Marxist communist side of feminism, a lot of the feminist radicals from the 1800s and early 1900s in, Eastern Europe, Russia, and a few other places, and how even though there seemed to be this dialectical opposition between the West, which was the like liberal capitalist type of feminists, and they focused a lot on property rights and things like this. In the East, it was very much a Marxist ethos, but how the two synthesized together, how they were funded by a lot of the same entities, and how it does do a lot of talking about the Fabians. And I know that you know about that. So, and how this Fabian Marxist version is what they ultimately ended up kind of weaving into all of the Western institutions. And our institutions are now completely captured by this ideology and how it has steered everything. It's crazy.
Not just educational institutions, not just political institutions, not just policy think tanks, every single area, including intelligence, of course. I mean, Haldane himself, who helped create and form MI6, was Fabian as well. I mean, if you go back and look at got some fantastic notes from meetings and stuff back then, and some of the language they were using was just wild, because they were just seeing everybody as reckless, stupid, thoughtless serfs that are only going to remain stupid. They have to serve the empire, and so we have to we have to manage them like we would manage any livestock. That's really what the idea.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why, curiously, you see a lot of the Marxists, a lot of the Bolshevik leaders and Marxist leaders came from like aristocratic backgrounds, and just the way that why they dissolved the family, and the fact that there's so much writing. These people, because they didn't have podcasting back then, right? So they wrote everything down. Everything was letters, everything was political tracts, it was journals, articles. They wrote so much. So it's not like we have to guess about what they believed or what they were trying to do. They tell you. I mean, they come right out and tell you all of that.
You read a Joyce letter and to his woman talking about fluffy farts and things. They tell you. They tell you everything.
Same thing with Napoleon. If you go back and read some of Napoleon's letters to Josephine, you're like, buddy, he's one of history's greatest simps, I will say. But yeah, these people, they left us everything. We can just go back and read their plans. They tell you exactly what they're going to do.
Leftist everything.
There you go. But
yeah, I got that.
Yeah, so the book's going to be about that, because there's such a whole other side to it and a whole nother big story to tell. And these people also very much into the occult, into some very bizarre things. If you look at some of the weird occultism around the Bolshevik regimes, it was quite wild. And it did have a lot of crossover with the West and where East meets West and things like that. And it'll get into dialectics and it'll get into all the stuff we were talking about today. But I think it's very essential, and I don't know of anyone, because unfortunately for me, I've had to read probably more feminist literature than almost any other human being alive, which is why you should pray for me and buy my book, because I'm doing this for you guys. But it really kind of lets you know why they did this and how they orchestrated it and just how pre-planned it was and just how much social engineering has happened and that we don't even know. Like the average person today, you have no idea why you believe so many of the things that you believe, why you operate the way you do in your daily life, and you think it's your thoughts and you think it's your views, but these are old ideas and you've been very much engineered and propagandized into believing certain things, and it's affecting the lives of real people every day all over the world. And I just want to correct the historical record. I haven't seen any other feminists tie these things together. I haven't seen them talk about what was happening in the liberal Western order and what was happening in the Eastern communist order, and how those things, like Jay Dyer talks about this a lot, this synthesis of those two things. And it was certainly there in feminism, and it's the ruling order of the world right now that we live in. So I think it's super important, and I just want to finish it and leave it for everyone before I leave this mortal coil. So I hope I get it done this year.
Yeah. Yeah, well, don't die afterwards. Don't do it, and then just maybe think of I'm sure you've probably got like tiny little thought in your head about what book comes next. At this stage, I suppose it's just like that. I know that I've got like a line. Writing a book once upon a time to me would have been like a completely like out of the that would be crazy idea. Now I've got like 3 or 4 books, some of them planned out, mapped out, part written, and I'm like, oh, this is getting serious now. I'm gonna have to actually do something about all this. But
you gotta do it.
The rolling ball, you know that once you do one, it's like, oh, I may as well do another now that I've already done that.
When I finished the first one, I was like, oh, I'm never doing that again. I'm never going to write again. And I immediately...
Are you partly addicted to organizing, though?
Am I good at...
what I find, one of the reasons why I find doing what I'm doing and what I assume you're doing as well, which is very similar, is that you get to put everything down in chronological order, look at it and go, oh, it makes more sense now that I've done that. Is that basically what's driving you forward?
Yeah, that's why my book is chronological. My first book is very much chronological because I think it's a story. It needs a beginning, middle, and end. You need to start with the beginning and where did the stuff come from and the genesis of ideas. I'm very, very interested in the genesis of ideas. Like, where did the idea come from? Who first came up with it? Why did they come up with it? What influenced them to develop a certain theory about the world or how things ought to be versus how things are? That kind of thing. I'm a big dork when it comes to like philosophy and all that kind of stuff. So I love thinking about why people come up with certain ideas, how they come up with them, why they want to. Everybody has a narrative. Even I have a narrative. Everybody's got like an ideology. You have to have some sort of guiding principle for how you operate in the world. So it's like, how do we come up with them? Where do they come from? How do these ideas disseminate? What makes some ideas become, so saturated within cultures and others not, and things like that. So I do love to I've developed a weird kind of way that I go about it, and I do a lot of profiling of people, and through trying to understand the person and their worldview and what they were after and what things in their life led them to do those things. And you do that with a bunch of people who share these ideas, and you can kind of see this picture coming together. You know what I mean? You can kind of see how, and that's why people organize into groups, right? That's why you get revolutionary groups, and you get espionage groups, and you get cults, and you get people organizing into groups based around an idea and a worldview, and then how they push that out into the ethos and how it disseminates. So it's fun stuff. But yeah, I like to do the organizing part of it. I like the gathering, the information gathering too, going down rabbit holes.
What you're saying there is massive. I mean, I when I wrote the Black Hand series, I just got to understand that each chapter will be a different person and a study of the world around them according to them at their time. Once you've put all the stories together, you get this really comprehensive look at what this world looks like. But I mean, I feel like that's what drives me forward all of the time. This want to tell a story. I was always writing songs, this beginning, middle, and end. Intro, first chorus, middle 8, solo, outro. And it works really well within article, and it allows me to understand what's going on in the world around me. Your work is fantastic. It's brilliant.
Oh, thanks.
I know I'm really happy that there's someone doing what you're doing, because it helps me out as well. Because I mean, I one day, I promise you, because I'm one of the books I'm working on is very much intertwined with feminism. That I maybe end up being the man who's read the most feminist literature on earth eventually. So I think
Oh, well, God bless you, Johnny, because it's not easy. I mean, some of them are just like Alice Bailey was reading her stuff almost killed me because it was just the worst. The writing itself was just so bad. And it was like, it's repetitive and she does bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, and then a paragraph that rambles and then more bullet points. And you're just like, what is going on here? What is this woman doing? Some of them were great writers, though. Some of them were really good. So,
there's one in particular that I would describe her as a feminist to an extent, was a woman who worked for the San Francisco Examiner called Alice Ricks, who I'm completely in love with her articles. They were some of the most interesting, intriguing, enlightening, and informative pieces. She does an amazing article on Bohemian Grove, which describes it by using 3 characters. I'll send it to you. I'll send you the article.
Please do.
It's well worth it. It's indulgent. One last thing before we go then.
Okay.
What is going on now? We've just seen all of the transgender stuff, the LGBTQ plus whatever community go crazy. The whole thing went mad for a long period. I feel like it's dying down now. I feel like that agenda is getting cut off because it was so extreme to so many people who felt they had to stand up against it, and it was full of logical fallacy. So in its essence, it was indefensible. You couldn't find arguments to properly defend it, so people were just avoiding it. Now, a lot of these institutions and organizations are being shut down. Do you feel that there is that the feminist movement will see it go away a bit and then just rest, or is it now that there's a building up of what and a conversation in the feminist community that wasn't there before?
Well, it is interesting, and you're so spot on with that analysis about the trans stuff. They pushed it too far. You know what I mean? The Fabians are so sneaky and so good at what they do, and they're the real danger because they do understand that these things have to be so slow and so incremental over time so as not to trigger the things within people that make us go, wait a minute, hold on, that doesn't sound right. And the trans thing, you know, when Obama got into the presidency in the United States, it's like they hit the throttle. They just hit the gas pedal and they went way too hard, way too fast. They started, you know, chopping up kids and things like this, and people it did trigger that ick factor within people that makes them go, this is not right. Something's off here. And I think we're seeing this with feminism now when you see like the red pill space becoming very popular. My husband and I have both been on the Whatever podcast a lot of times talking to these young women, trying to help walk them through their own thought processes to see where the contradictions are. We do get a lot of heat for that because they think we're mean, but there's been a lot of times where I've been on that show and walked someone through, one of these young ladies, through their thought process of why they believe what they believe and what their presuppositions are and why they're making certain life choices. And you can see live on the show their mind coming unraveled, and you can see them going, uh-oh, I may have built my entire life and worldview on baloney that I just never questioned, because most of us don't, especially when we're young. So I think with shows like that, with some of the revival of masculinity type of stuff that we're seeing, there's a lot of women who are kind of cosplaying the trad wife thing right now, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it does kind of let you know that there are a lot of women who are
Don't complain. We all want a trad wife. Come on, don't stop them now.
And then every time one of them turns out to be phony, everybody attacks me and goes, we knew it was all baloney. But it's just letting you know that a lot of people, I think people are sick of being lonely. I think younger people are tired of not being able to figure out why they can't have relationships, why they can't have families. It's like, people are starting to catch on, and I think that feminism is going to become passé. I think it will definitely see a big drop off. I think there's going to be a bit of a revival around masculinity and traditional gender roles because of the pendulum swing. But I don't think it will last forever. These ideas never go away. Sometimes they're pretty dormant and pretty unpopular for long periods, for maybe centuries, especially with feminism, because it does relate to survival. I mean, the human species will not, persist into the future if feminism remains the dominant ideology. The birth rates will be too low. The family is demolished right now, and it's like people want that back. They want to rebuild some of that. They want what their great-grandparents had. So I do think it's going to wane. I think it's going to become out of style. I think it'll be a lot less popular for a while. I think the main threat of it coming back is going to be kind of this transhumanist. I love what Elon Musk is doing with Doge and some other things right now. I think that's great. But I think some of this like transhumanist robotic AI future stuff is going to create like what would we be on now, like maybe fifth or sixth wave, a different type of feminism. I think it will rebrand. I think the old ideas will kind of rebrand with transhumanism and try to come back that way. But I think right now there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that we can fight it better than we have for the last century. I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that more and more women and men will reject it. We need men to reject feminism too. Everybody forgets that like the men have kind of been sold on it since the boomer generation. The boomer generation really bought into the gender equality stuff, and it wrecked a lot of their lives and a lot of their families. And I think hopefully we can fight back against it in its next incarnation and have some success. I think there's reason to be optimistic.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with, that's what my thought is a pendulum swing, and the next time round it'll be transhumanist technology will be the impulse push those in power to try and target women again. Because I think this is something that happens constantly throughout history, is every ideology finds that it can convince women easier than it can convince men. So automatically the focus becomes on women, and they beckon in the new era, whatever era that may be in that. And it's so very interesting. There'd be a billion more questions in actual fact that I'd want to ask you in the whole world, because all of this stuff is really interesting and you do amazing work. Just tell people where they can find you. You said you got a Substack. Of course, there'll be links galore in the description. So if anybody wants to go buy your book, they'll be able to find it under there, or they want to support you in some way. But tell people where's best to find you, where you prefer to be.
If you're the reading type, definitely check out my Substack. It's rwilson.substack.com. I want to be doing a lot more on that this year. Also, my YouTube channel, just Rachel Wilson. There's some really great, I think, underrated streams I've done on there. I did one with Professor Edward Dutton that was pretty interesting and historic and fun, along with a whole bunch of other ones. But those two places. And then if you want to watch me argue with idiots, you can follow me on X at Rach4 Patriarchy. So at Rach4 Patriarchy.
Yeah, you find that, do you, as well? It's fun, though, I have to say. I mean, debating, you like this debating stuff, don't you?
Oh,
Come
yeah.
on.
Oh, actually, I do. I've also got a special podcast about to drop on modern day debate, where it was me versus four gentlemen in a rapid fire debate style. This is like a new kind of thing that's becoming popular because of the podcast Jubilee, where they sit me down and they have me rapid fire argue a bunch of different guys. No women. We can't ever get women to do these. I'm always the only one. But I think that I handily crushed them, so you guys might enjoy that one as well.
I might sign up to be one of your competitors and see if I can argue you down on something. I'm scared. You'll only beat me. Well, thanks for coming on NEWSPASTE Podcast. I really appreciate it. Stick around, because I'm going to ask you to come on Truth Bomb as well. So
all right.
Have a little, because that's going to be something. I'm thinking it's another quick fire round. But thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me, Johnny. It's a pleasure as always.